All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I am not Dr. White, but welcome everybody to week 7, I guess, of CE 452 Senior Seminar. So I'm just covering for Dr. White, as you know. We have our guest speaker here, McWhorter, from the Army Corps of Engineers. He's going to tell you about an interesting experience he had in Antarctica.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm recording the presentation for Dr. Waite as well, so screen and audio and whatnot will show up here. I'm going to pass around a sign-in sheet just to collect attendance for him. I'll get the lights adjusted. But with that, I'm just going to shut up and turn it over to our guest. So with that, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
So,
Hey everyone, I'm Eli. Worked for the Army Corps of Engineers and in construction for about 8 years now. I am just a construction guy, works in the field. I did civil engineering because I didn't want to wear a tie, generally. But I have to say this, views presented by a youth state speaker, me, are those of me, not necessarily representative of the views of the DoD or its components. So, McMurdo Station in Antarctica, it's a pretty wild place to work. For me to get there, it was 28 hours of travel. I flew from Columbus to Philadelphia to San Francisco to Christchurch, New Zealand, and then from Christchurch, New Zealand, it was another 8 hours south to go to McMurdo Station in Antarctica. McMurdo Station is the closest point to the South Pole that a boat can get to. This is the pier dock area. They build an ice pier here every year. Everything that gets shipped to McMurdo Station comes on 2 vessels, big giant boats. Those 2 boats are essentially the only way to get things to McMurdo. One flight costs about $1.3 million, so you try to have flights full of people, not full of equipment, because every pound is valuable in terms of fuel and flight. So every bit of food, every bit of toilet paper, soap, all the parts and concrete and steel gets shipped on a vessel to arrive there once a year. And the rest of the time it's all in the storage building like this, that's a super freezer. On the side are a bunch of AC units that would normally be on the front of a semi-truck, but there's 8 of them on the side of a building, keeps it at like -30 inside, so it is very frozen. Good stay. All the food comes in frozen containers, so every bit of food I ate there had to come from frozen stuff and prepared by some talented chefs to make some good meals. The most challenging thing for working in Antarctica is logistics. Like I just said, everything's got to show up on a ship, so you have to prepare for every detail. To build a building, you have to know exactly how many fasteners you're going to have, how many pieces of steel, how many little bits of grout you have to show up and cover up things with before you even start, and that needs to be shipped, which takes over a year to get there. So logistics is the biggest challenge when you're working here. Cold wasn't so bad. I like West Virginia weather where we get cold winters. It took a while before I saw something actually the coldest I ever saw. Normal temperatures were like 25 to -5, but the issue is normal wind is like 25 to 45 mile per hour with like 60 mile per hour gusts. So if it's 0 degrees and there's a 30 mile per hour wind with gusts, that's -20 degrees. You're talking frostbite in a few minutes if you don't have your everything covered. So I would walk around with a scarf and stuff all day. I actually wore these shoes most of the time there. I didn't need warm shoes, but it's because I run hot. I'd easily stay warm. This was right after I got there, looking at Mount Erebus, and over to the right there is Mount Terror. They are the southernmost volcano on Earth. Flew in on an LC-130. 8 hours, not fun. It's loud, bumpy, but it was a really cool experience working there. This is what McMurdo Station is on Ross Island. It's all igneous rock. The entire island is made of this dark black gravel. Igneous rock turns into ultrafine dust. That was the worst part for me, is dealing with dust in the air, because I'm spoiled with West Virginia's humidity. Down there, Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth. So, yeah, there's lots of ice, but ice is not water, so everything is frozen. There's air, moisture is even frozen out of the air, so humidity could be 5 to 10% at most. And inside where you're running the heater, the humidity will be between 3 and 5% if you're lucky. That was horrendous for my throat. When I've grown up here in West Virginia, humidity of 40 to 60% is normal. Breathing in absolute dry air was very difficult for me, but I got through it. This was my first snow. This is the dormitory I was staying in. Can't really see a whole lot on a snowy day, but on a sunny day, those mountains in the distance there are about 40 to 60 miles away. You're on the Ross Island Sound, so on a clear day, you can see some mountains, which those are around 12 to 13,000 feet tall, as well as right in the foreground behind this church is the ocean level. So those go from ocean level to 12 or 14,000 feet, depending on which peak you're talking about. Fun facts about working in Antarctica: we don't use concrete. The pole is placed, or as well as most foundations are placed, by a water gravel slurry. You mix water and gravel together, put it in the ground, that will freeze, and it will never thaw, and it's stronger than concrete. Just because ground temperatures here, we bury our pipes like 3 feet below the surface to keep them from freezing. Ground temperatures there are around 2 degrees. So you can go down 80 feet below ground, which I got to see building a foundation. 80 feet below ground, there's still ice as part of the structure of the, I guess, the stratification of layers underneath the surface. Ice is part of that. So the ground is built by ice and rock. Here's a nice little snowy view. Can't really see across the ocean because of the storm. There's a better view of the mountains. Downtown McMurdo, it's an interesting experience because you're all in it together. When I was first there, there was about 600 people living in this little village that's probably about the size of Marshall campus, and then quickly it dropped down to like 300 people, and we all eat in the same cafeteria. We all live in one of 5 dorm buildings that are like right next to each other. Most everyone there has a roommate. I was a special guest because I'm a government employee. I didn't have a roommate. However, working there is wild because everyone is there to work. You're not there to go on vacation. You can't go on vacation to Antarctica. You can take a cruise up to the coast, and you might be able to step off that boat for a few minutes, but there's no vacationing in Antarctica. Everyone's there to work, so your normal work week is 6 days a week, 9.5-hour days. So if I had any extra stuff to do, it would be a 60-hour work week if I was over just a little bit on a couple of days. I think that is Mount Victory. It's one of the closest ones, and that mountain is about 25 or 30 miles away from where I was standing there. Here's a typical, what is that, 24th of March. So it was -15, and the wind chill was -41 with 14-mile-per-hour wind. So, and then here was a fun day in April as winter was starting to get worse. -22 down below -55 degrees for your wind chill. Whenever it got down to -60, they do what's called a Con 1. It's not on these screens, but in a Condition 1, you are not allowed to walk outside of your building. There's a safety procedures and electric signs by every door that lets you know what are the conditions outside. And when it gets really bad, you're not even allowed to walk from your dormitory to your work or from your work office to the cafeteria, anything. You just stay in place. But normally, stuff like this will only last an hour or two, and then it'll get a little bit more mild. And by a little bit more mild, I mean like -50s instead of -70s. The biggest hazard can be visibility, because in situations like this, visibility will get down to like 10 or 15 feet. And sure, I might know the area pretty well, but if you can only see 10 or 15 feet in front of you, There's a lot of hazards. If there's any equipment moving around, or if the fire team has an emergency, they need to move out, having someone standing in the road could be a lethal hazard. In addition to your 8 hours flight from New Zealand, so that's like a 16 hours, if you're lucky, trip to a hospital. So if you slip and fall, it's a lot more likely in a heavy windstorm, likely you're going to wait more than 48 hours to get to that hospital if you fall and break something. So the average wait time during summer is about 10 days. Average wait time during winter is about 45 days. So if something serious goes wrong, if I have some internal issue, or if I get really sick, or I break something, it's going to be 20 to 40 days before I get to a hospital. So there's a rigorous physical qualifications for getting there. This was my dorm room window. Everything there was built in the 50s and 60s, all with like a 40-year lifespan. Now we're just patching everything, keeping it working, just because it's cheaper that way. But that is some of the moisture that would be in my room, frozen out of it. Here's the vessel. So this is the vessel right as it arrived. This is the 1 year we used a steel causeway. This whole bundle of stuff on the top is a pier that they build that would be floating out here once they were done. And that is the Coast Guard Polar Star in the background. The Polar Star ice cutter. This was a warm summer, so we didn't need it, but normally all of this water is solid, and there's actually a hiking trail that comes from this tip out and around this way for a couple of miles, a nice hiking trail. However, this year it was water, so it was not able to build a nice pier. Here's the Polar Star. This is the cutter. Essentially, this much of the front is solid iron, as well as like the bottom half of that is solid iron, just to be a big, tough breaker. Other challenges of working in Antarctica are your people. Everyone has to hydrate more. If I'm used to drinking about 2 of these a day, so that's around 80 ounces of water. I was drinking almost 6 of these a day, well over a gallon of water a day, and I was still thirsty. Just because I'm bundled up and warm, there's a lot of extra stress associated with going outside in the 10-degree temperature and coming inside to a place that's like 60 degrees, derobing all the gear I was wearing, and then putting it back on, going outside, walking around. The cold air, it'll zap you. I feel like I always got zapped of energy whenever it was hot outside. Well, being in pure cold all the time and working 10-hour days, 6 days a week, it's possible, but it's a real challenge. And an interesting point of working in McMurdo, almost everyone I was working with was in their 20s. It's a lot more common for people in their 20s to go off and work at McMurdo. It's all through the National Science Foundation. If you wanted to try working in McMurdo Station, look up National Science Foundation Antarctica work. There's jobs for everything there in McMurdo. There's about 6 or 7 field engineers on site at all times, as well as to have one person doing research, you have to have a whole community to support that person. You have cooks, you have electricians, you have plumbers, you have mechanics for the vehicles, you have general maintenance people who might work on the building or other things. There's janitors, there's a lot of random jobs that I wouldn't think would be there, as well as a physical therapist, a dentist, and a field medicine doctor. There's a lot of really cool job opportunities there. Even working as a IT tech support, you don't necessarily have to have the tech degree. You just have to be willing to go across the world and spend 4 to 8 months isolated from everyone you know. Maybe you're going with one person you know, but it's a rigorous qualifications, because they want to make sure you have it's called a federal background check to make sure that you're not going to do anything violent or crazy or have a history of that, as well as I mean, it's a good job. Everyone gets paid well. I know that one of the lowest paying jobs there was the janitor, and they're making $27 an hour, which is more than I made out of college for the first, 8 years. Normal vehicles there are all Super Duty, that's E350s. Basically every vehicle there is from 2006 or 7, and they all have maybe 10 or 15,000 miles on them. However, they look like they have about 200,000 miles on them. They're all beat to hell. This is Ivan, the Terrabus. That's how a lot of people got from the airplanes back up to the McMurdo station. And then this is a maintenance truck. It has the tracks on it. Those are required in heavy, deep snow, or if it's slushy snow, the tires will punch through and that won't. Here's an example of our construction site. I was there for a dormitory housing being built, as well as a dock trying to be built. The dock didn't go so well because a really nasty storm eroded the shoreline from that first picture back about 20 feet. So the whole design had to change. However, the building construction went along smoothly. I guess that's an example of a ancient truck that's probably a 1950s or 60s model truck, if not earlier, that they're still using because getting equipment there is difficult. It's easier to fix something up and keep it working. This is an example of the dozer that goes to the South Pole. So McMurdo is the closest place to the South Pole on the coast. So that's where all the supplies for McMurdo Station and South Pole Station go to. One of these machines gets tied up with about 16 or 17 sleds that look like this. Those are actually living pods, but these are the sleds that could be for field research or a dive team. A couple of those are diving sheds, which have a hole in the middle. People do ice diving there. That dozer pulls about 15 of those sleds to the South Pole. It's an 800-mile drive, and that dozer moves at 5 or 7 miles per hour. So somebody who is real chill and able to be by themselves for multiple days and is also capable of servicing the entirety of one of these is the one who has to drive that. So you're going to spend a week and a half driving at 7 miles an hour for around 900 miles, dragging all the supplies, which is food and toiletries and other various things for research, carrying that to South Pole Station. This arm on the back is an example of how you would service it. That's there to push down and pick the thing up if you had to get underneath, or help pry up something if you need to fix one of the sleds behind it. What else we have here? Yeah, so these are the living pods. All the hiking trails will have those about one every mile or so, or maybe less. When you're there, you can see when you see dark clouds on the horizon, about 30 or 40 minutes after that, you can have any level of storm coming at you. So if it's a nice sunny day when you start your hike, and I did go on hikes there, there's recreational stuff to do. I went skiing in Antarctica. That was wild. But those are scattered out along the hiking trails because you never know if a crazy storm's going to show up. And although I had the gear to survive cold, it's not possible to continue walking when you can only see 10 feet and the flags are 50 feet apart. It's very easy to get lost and lose everything if you're there. Here's a picture of McMurdo Station, standing up on Observation Hill. So this is the cafeteria building. These are office buildings. That one was my office. Those are the dormitory buildings. This big white building is the building that was being constructed when I was there. It is the tallest and largest building in Antarctica, which is 3 stories on about 5 to 8 foot stilts off the ground. So, largest building in Antarctica, but it's about 3 stories tall. Here's a nice wide-angle view of the whole town. it's one of my favorite things there would probably be when you're looking around, you can see as far as the land allows, which would be over 70 miles in a couple spots. From the top of the hill to the top of another hill, you can see over 70 miles away. Now, it's a little tiny peak behind other mountains is what I'm seeing 70 miles away, but it is neat to see things so far away. So this is Mount Erebus, the southernmost active volcano on Earth. In the winter time, when the sun is set and is gone, you can see a little bit of an orange glow, and you will always see a little bit of a steam cloud coming off the top of it, which there's not much of it there right now. And then one of the wild things about getting there in the summer, this was my first Saturday night out there. Took this photo at 11 p.m. The sun gets a little bit lower than that, but it was strange to get used to. The sun would be to the north at noon, up not quite high in the sky, but like middle of the morning height, and then it would spin around to a little bit lower on the horizon. That's about how low it would get, and then to the south, because that's looking almost due south, and then it would rotate around back up to the north. There would be no sunsets from about November to March, and then from March to April the sun starts setting, and because it spins around the horizon like that, a sunset, or the golden hour, is about 6 or 7 hours long, as the sun is like basically dragging right across the horizon. And then in the middle of the night it's still light because the sun is only a few degrees below the horizon, and then in the morning come back up. That's the transition period, but pretty quickly goes from that to very dark, and I got to see more stars than I think I've ever seen before. It was exceedingly dark, and it's hard to describe how bright the sky was, but that sky was, the Southern Cross was bright enough to help me see on the ground, which was kind of bizarre. I'm not used to things being visible because of starlight. So here's a little example of some of those mountains. So where I was in McMurdo, this is 20 miles, 40 miles, 60 miles. These little bits of yellow were the peaks where I could see from McMurdo, which is on the tip of the little peninsula, Ross Island. And this is over on the inlet corner of Antarctica. These are all my Antarctica stickers. But on this picture of the continent, this little divot that goes in, which is close to New Zealand, we're right at the innermost part of that. And I know a couple of my godparents were surprised. They're like, there's mountains in Antarctica? I thought it was all flat. There's enormous mountains there. So here's some pictures of the wildlife. These were, I don't think these are emperor penguins. I don't remember the other kind of penguin that was there. But it's molting season, so they have to stay out of the water. They shed their summer fur or summer feathers and get their winter feathers. Penguins are impressively clumsy, and one of the only upright creatures aside from us. Got some Aurora australis. In the northern hemisphere it's called Aurora borealis, and the southern hemisphere is called Aurora australis. Same thing, just different place. Difficult to see in town, but I got to see it a few times. This is the McMurdo ground station with me standing in front of the satellite. All of the weather data that is used on Earth is downloaded to McMurdo station. So every 50 minutes the satellite gets back to the South Pole. Imagine the globe, there's a satellite going around like this. That satellite works its way around the world, getting a different slice each rotation, and all of the data that's used for weather data is sold by NASA to the rest of the world out of McMurdo. Here's some more penguins. That's right by the sea ice. And then here's a couple spotted seals lounging around, hanging out with the penguins. And then here's my flight home. This is around 5:30 or 6 p.m. on a Saturday night. The sky is quite dark. Yeah, that's all the pictures I have. Trying to think of anything else there was. It was a lot of fun. Also, it's a lot of hard work. Working 6 days a week was rough. I only did it for 4 months. Some people do it for 8 or 10 months. You're not allowed to stay there for more than 12 months just because they don't want people to stay in that area. However, a lot of the people I worked with, they would go to work in McMurdo, and they were required to leave after so long. They would go from New Zealand to Australia to some of the Pacific Islands to Japan and stay away for like a 3-month vacation and then go right back to McMurdo, which is a pretty wild way to spend a year, I think. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. Does anyone have any questions about working in McMurdo? Go ahead.
Did you have to cold start engines, or were they just running?
Every engine has a heat wrap on it, and every parking spot has plug-ins by it. There is not a single parking place that doesn't have plug-ins. So this was at the maintenance yard, so it wasn't being plugged in. But here, you can see the conduit on the building right there. That is where those things stay, and every engine there has to have a cold wrap. Most engines there are diesel. A few of them are gas, but almost every motor there was a diesel, and they all have to have a heat wrap, whether it's gas or diesel. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay. So you were there to working on this erection of this new structure.
I do my normal job, which is quality assurance and construction. I watch a contractor do the work, write and report what I see, how this is being done, make sure they're following laws, following rules, following the contract.
So I'm going to ask a civil engineering question.
Yeah.
What was, during your time there, what was like their biggest challenge with construction?
Materials.
Really?
You get down there, they start attaching drywall and then the correct fastener to attach it to the correct stud in the wall. They only had 10,000 and they needed 60,000. So then they had to figure out, oh, well, what can we steal from somewhere else? What can we use from some other project? It's a lot of figuring things out from a standpoint of, well, we don't have it, we have to use what's here, and we can get it a year from now, next February, but that's not a good answer. You want to continue your construction work right away. And a lot of it is also just fabrication. There is a carpentry shop and machine shop that can build basically anything, including an entire building. So there is a lot of lumber stockpiled there, as well as there's a lot of steel stockpiled there. For example, all the buildings are sheet steel on the outside. If something happens and high winds, a rock crashes into the side of a building, you have to plug that hole up. That's just a steel patch and some carpentry to form it together. I mean, it's really about taking materials you have and figuring out how to get a solution. Any more engineering questions? Yeah.
You said you had to drill down to get pilings in. Does that, since you said most of it's 80 and 80 foot down, does that cause problems with drilling? Does it take a really long time, or how does that work?
Took forever. It took forever. Normal drilling operation, I'm used to cores being like maybe a foot diameter for foundations. These were 3 foot, or they were 4 foot diameter hole for a 3 foot diameter piling, a big steel tube that was going to go down inside of it. And the design was this piling, once they get it in place, they do that water and gravel slurry around the outside, and that's how it would be cemented into place. However, it had to be 80 feet deep to hold on to it from ocean waters. From this little spot right here, right here's a nice calm day, but I saw storm swells crashing over the top of this little peak here, and that peak's about 55 feet above the water. Yeah.
So are there any permanent residents there?
Nope. The longest you're technically allowed to stay is 14 months, but they do their best not to let anyone stay for over a year, just because they call it the brain freeze or the ice dumb. After you're there and you don't have a normal diet, the trouble is when everything's frozen, there's no fresh greens, no fresh vegetables, and if you don't have any fresh food and then start having some fresh food, like you have a salad the first day you come back to New Zealand, it'll go through you in about 10 minutes, when your body is not used to having that kind of food at all, as well as there's other issues. During the winter, everyone gets vitamin D deficient. Your eyes develop vitamin D from sunlight exposure, and when you go, let's see, April to August, and there is no sunlight at all, a lot of issues show up. In addition to being there, you're away from everyone that you did know. Like maybe I made some great friends working there. However, everyone I knew, I called home every day. I tried to call my mom at least, but like it's a pretty extreme working environment. In addition, everyone works 6 days a week. Working 6 days a week gets to be a real drag later on in however long you're staying. Yeah, you go. Yeah.
So that's a serious question. What's
Please.
the first thing you did when you got off the plane?
Take a lot of pictures and take a hike.
Oh, I meant on the way back.
Oh, went and got a really juicy burger. Yeah.
If you were given the opportunity, would you go back and do it again?
In a heartbeat. There's a coworker of mine who's going down like right around now until December or January, and then someone else is going down from January till May, and then I have an opportunity potentially to go back in August a year from now, or like 11 months from now, which I will absolutely do. There's about 2,000 people that visit Antarctica per year, and so out of the 6 or 7 billion people on Earth, that's a tiny little group of people, and I got to win that lottery of going to Antarctica. Any other questions?
You stole my question.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I can't wait to go back. I think one of the other really cool parts is I didn't have the responsibilities of a normal adult when I was there. Normally, I have to pay my utilities and clean my house and cook for myself and clean up after myself. When I'm there, there's no cooking. It's all done in the cafeteria. There's no paying for anything. The only thing you can pay for are souvenirs, like a baseball cap or a jacket, or alcohol and tobacco. They ration their alcohol, so you can't just buy a bunch of beer every day, but that's one of the few things that you buy there is tobacco and alcohol. But aside from that, I saved a boatload of money because I was working 60-hour weeks, not spending any money. I bought a couple nice Patagonia jackets that had the Antarctica seal on it for my mom and sister, but aside from that, I didn't spend any money my whole trip there, which was a really nice bonus because you're there working a whole lot and then you're not spending money on anything and having fun. There are fun events to do though, like everything there is run by the community. So somebody will volunteer to run trivia every other Wednesday, and someone else will do a bingo night every other Wednesday, and we had a karaoke night every other Friday, and so on and so forth, like a birthday party or something on a Saturday night. They have 2 bars. They're technically lounges, so they don't serve alcohol at the bar. You have to buy that from the store, but on a Saturday night, there'll be somebody who's DJing or playing live music for a party. It's just to help keep everyone sane. You got to have some relaxing, fun time. You can't just work for 4 months straight. You'll go nuts. That was another fun part is there's a whole music room there. People have brought and donated instruments. So there was a music room that had a couple drum sets, a few bass guitars, a whole bunch of guitars, and a bunch of other random instruments, keyboards. So I got to see live music a few times while I was there. Any other? Yeah.
So were the people in your area, was there like any sort of language barrier, or was it mostly people from the U.S.?
Almost everyone was from Colorado or California, except on my construction site, almost everyone was a Kiwi, people from New Zealand. And that's just because trade staff from America get paid very well in America. Trade staff in New Zealand don't get paid nearly as well. And working in McMurdo, you're paid US dollars, which a US dollar is like $1.85 in New Zealand dollars. So they made fantastic money working the trades there. But most everyone would be English speaking. There's a few people from the Italian base and from the French base that were visiting McMurdo. However, most people are either from New Zealand, which speaks English, or America. You had a question? Yeah.
Were there any, like, I guess not strange, but just interesting habits you kept when you moved back home?
Drinking more water than usual, as well as got myself back into working out. I worked out for years, and then I stopped because I got too busy with work. And then when I was there, I figured out, well, there's a way to work my workouts into working a 60-hour work week. So I kept that habit too, which has taken me a while. But
What was the adjustment to hot days, like when you got back?
I hated it. I hate the heat. I want it to be winter. I want it to snow every day. I want to go skiing all the time. I loved it there because the only overheating I did would be after I walk inside the building and I have to immediately take off like 5 layers. But aside from that, yeah, I loved the cold. I didn't like how dry it was, but I did like how cold it was. I was much more comfortable. Most people wear big heavy boots and big overall pants all the time and a big like double jacket. Not me. I had on pants like this that are kind of slightly windproof with big heavy socks, and then a t-shirt, a flannel, and a thin shell jacket, and that was enough for me to stay pretty warm. But I'm a person who goes skiing in negative whatever temperatures, and going 50 miles per hour down a hill, you get wind chill. Any other questions of anything?
What was the weirdest thing that happened while you were there?
Just the parties. Like for example, one of the lounges got all new tables and chairs, which had very nice wheels on them, and the lounge had like a hard tile floor. So soon enough, the first night after those chairs were in there was a conga line of chairs snaking through the room between people dancing and stuff. Just weird, fun stuff. But I wouldn't say anything was crazy bizarre. I laughed at some of the artwork there. Somebody made a painting of construction of the ice wall, and it was people like shoveling snow and using a dozer to push to an ice wall. And there is an ice wall that's really far away. Down on the ground level over there, there is a wall of ice that's like 60 feet tall before you get onto the land. So if you're in a boat, you come up to the edge of Antarctica, most of the continent, there's a 60 to 100 foot tall wall of ice. So yeah, there's a giant wall of ice all the way around Antarctica. There's a couple spots like McMurdo where you could get onto the land, but for the most part, there's a lot of ice. I guess that's a interesting point. Those mountains, a little over 10,000 feet tall, when you get to the South Pole Station, it is completely flat because of the ice. When you're standing at South Pole, you're standing on 10,000 feet of ice, and down below that's some ground that's above sea level. And there, because it's so flat for like 500-mile radius, if a pressure change of a storm coming in, that could change it from being something like you're standing at 7,000 feet to you're standing at 18,000 feet. That pressure differential will change so drastically just because there's nothing holding the air there. When a low pressure cell comes in, it can really screw with you if you're not used to altitude breathing or getting, if you've never been above 12,000 feet, you'll get altitude sickness very easily at South Pole. But yeah, there's a lot of ice there. Any other thoughts? Well, I will advertise for my employer, the Army Corps. The hiring freeze right now, can't hire anyone, although we do need people. But the Army Corps has jobs all around the world, including tiny little opportunity in McMurdo out of Huntington. But there's a Europe district, there's a Pacific district out of Tokyo, there's districts all across the United States, as well as South America is done out of Puerto Rico. So if it's something that appeals to you, working somewhere across the world, Army Corps is definitely an opportunity. The Europe district is done out of Frankfurt, Germany, and there's a Middle East district done out of Kuwait. And I see job postings for those places all the time, because there's, once you work for the Corps, there's internal, like I could go work anywhere for 120 days and come back kind of thing. As well as if you wanted to work for a National Science Foundation, everyone working in McMurdo is a contractor, so they're not necessarily government employees, but there was multitude of engineering jobs, like a couple mechanical engineers and a couple electrical engineers who were just on site, as well as a few project engineers. One was a architect, one was a civil general, one was a, I think he was an industrial engineer. But there's definitely some pretty neat opportunities, as well as New Zealand. Definitely want to go back to New Zealand. That was a treat, being flown there by work. Cool. No other ideas or questions about absolutely anything working in Antarctica? Cool. I was able to talk for 40 minutes. It's pretty good for no presentations in the past decade.
Any other questions?
Cool. All right.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating. That was really cool stuff.
I mean, it was a wild trip. I absolutely want to go back.
All right, did everybody get the sign-in sheet? Everybody sign in? Okay, let me get that, and that's all we got, everybody.
I got